seeds from those and preserve the genetics of those trees. Yeah, this has been a successful year this past year in finding about half a dozen or 6 or 8 of these groups of wild chestnuts out in our forests in Brownville and Lincoln and Sydney, right here where I live in Hamden. So that's something you can help us with too, is if you know of any wild chestnuts out there in your woodlots, we'd love to know about it.
All right, we could actually create a little database, put something on our website and have people, you know, if they know they have got some, and even some of those who are a little savvier can, well, certainly locate them with a GPS, you know, mark them on a map or something like that so they can be found. We do have a couple questions. How many trees are planted in a typical project?
Well, we sell and distribute seeds and seedlings as part of what we do every year. So we have, I think last year, about 1,500 seedlings that were purchased and planted all over Maine. In our orchards, the 20 orchards that the chapter maintains, we at one time had about 35 to 40,000 chestnut trees. And as I've described, we've been winnowing those down. So we have fewer than that now. But we encourage people throughout Maine to get some chestnut seedlings and give it a try. It was really interesting when we had the field trips, the field days with the woodlot owners in Maine, and asked how many people had chestnuts growing. Almost every hand in the room went up. So I think a lot of your members are already experimenting with planting chestnuts.
That's great. Do you have to be a member to become a test grower or to get seeds? And if so, what is involved in becoming a member of the Chestnut Association?
Well,
I'm
that's
sorry, Chestnut Foundation, American Chestnut Foundation.
Well, that's pretty simple to do. You just go to the American Chestnut Foundation website and go to membership, and you can become a member in the next 5 minutes. Pretty simple to do, and you can click on the Maine chapter, and then you're an instant member of the Maine chapter. And we do provide seeds to new members each spring. So if you're interested in getting some seeds, I think we distribute 6 new seeds to new members that sign up. And then we have a sale every year of seeds and seedlings. And we do that. One of the best places to buy seedlings is through the Arboretum in Augusta.
Great. And we can provide some information in our newsletter. So we're just having a newsletter meeting right now. I'm thinking about all the things that we can make sure we have available to our members on our website. So this is good. And then one more question, a couple more questions. And who should be contacted if they do have a chestnut and he has property in Gouldsboro, and if there is some chestnuts, would they be contacting you directly, Mark?
Yeah, they could contact me directly. We could put that kind of information in your newsletter as well.
Okay.
But we do have a Maine chapter of the American Chestnut Foundation webpage. And again, that's accessed through the national organization's website. So you can look that up and find out our contact information and get a hold of us. We have a group of folks who like to go out and check out these trees. Sometimes we find horse chestnuts, but many times, like I described earlier, we are finding some older, pure American trees that are still surviving out there for some reason or another.
Great. And then last one, when is the seedling sale at the Arboretum in Augusta?
I would start checking their website about April or May. They take pre-orders, and then I think it's in early May that we distribute the seedlings through those pre-orders at the Arboretum.
Great. We'll get that in the newsletter as well and on our website. Well, this has been great. I think it's great timing because the news about the determination that the transgenic work that you folks were doing needed to be relooked at, and it was our main scientist that figured that out, and excited to hear there's a mid-course correction and that there's a lot more options, that no one's giving up, that this is full steam ahead to continue this restoration work. So it was a good news story from you, Mark, and I appreciate that.
Well, you're welcome. Yep, that's science. We adapt and we move forward. So we're gonna restore the chestnut.
Great, thank you. All right, we're gonna continue. We're hitting our last presentation, and we saved the hardest one for last. This is always a tough this is a tough presentation because it's about pests and disease. I'm going to pass over the mic to Carla Black. She's going to introduce our final panelist of the day, and then we'll catch up with everybody after that to finish up our day together. So, Carla, it's all yours.
Thanks, Jen. We're happy to have Allison Canody here to give her update on forest pest and disease. As Jen was alluding to, it's always a highly anticipated presentation. So we're happy that we could end on this note. Allison leads the Maine Forest Service Forest Health and Monitoring team. She joined the Forest Health and Monitoring in 2001, measuring trees for the Forest Inventory and Monitoring Unit in Hancock and Washington counties. In 2006, she rejoined the FHM staff as a forest entomologist after completing her MS thesis work on balsam woolly adelgid in Maine. Hemlock woolly adelgid occupied a lot of her time in the first 10 years with the Forest Service. Spruce budworm became a focus in 2016. In addition, she has had responsibility for administering state forestry-related quarantines, supervising insect and disease field staff, and responding to client inquiries regarding forest health. In January 2019, Allison was promoted to Director of the Forest Health and Monitoring Division and appointed State Entomologist. Welcome, Allison.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to this audience. I'm gonna, can everybody hear me okay? Is that, this is a brand new computer, so it's the first time I've dealt with this audio.
Yes, I can hear you.
Awesome. All right. Yeah, I wish we were together in Augusta. Much prefer that type of presentation, but this is a good backup. So I'm going to try to share my presentation. Let's see. Oh, you're gonna have to bear with me because
Try again.
Yeah, well, no, I can't see my Zoom screen anymore.
Okay, yeah, you'll have to reduce your
Yep.
spreadsheet, your presentation first, then
Yeah,
share.
let me see. I think this is what I want to share. All right, how does that look?
It's getting there. Yep, you got it.
All right, perfect. Okay, so just share that screen, and with all that background, Tom, I share a 20-year anniversary with you with all the absence that I had. So in February, I'll be 20 years with the Maine Forest Service. It was a big year for me too. So just going into the update, I wanted to acknowledge that a lot of the work that I'm presenting is not my own. It comes through the hard work of my team at Forest Health and Monitoring, and I hope that many of you have had an opportunity to visit with them on your own woodlots, or see presentations that they have given. I'll say at this point, they're probably much better presenters than I am, because they do spend a lot of time talking with folks throughout the year. So 2024, what a year, or 2023, what a year. I guess already in 2024, we are getting towards an interesting year with this storm that we had overnight and today as well. So I'm going to try to advance my slideshow. Does everything look good? All right.
Yep, all good.
So one of the things that I wanted to jump right into, ironically, was the weather of 2023. And in thinking about forest health now, we have to think about how climate is changing and how that's going to be impacting both the trees, but also the pests and diseases that affect our trees. And if you haven't seen it, the Maine Climate Office has a really nice website to explore some of those data as far as the climate data related to Maine, some very nice presentations of the data, as well as ability to load the data and play with it yourself in Excel or other platforms. And so one of the periods I wanted to look at was the growing season for 2023. And you can see that for last year, the period between May and September of 2023, it was warmer than normal, just by 2.5 degrees Fahrenheit, with the normal being the period between 1901 and 2000. And it was also wetter than normal, that by as much as 9.7 inches. That's the statewide average. Of course, Maine's a fairly large state with very different climate from north to south often. And but overall average, we had about 9.7 inches more of precipitation than we did in the period between 1901 and 2000 during the growing season. And if I were to look back to the previous few years, that would have been a kind of different story. We had some pretty dry periods in the growing seasons prior to this last one. And then if we look at another important time of the year from the perspective of pests in particular, less diseases, but more the pests, it's the frost season. And they actually very conveniently have this summary between November and March of the calendar year. So this is November of 2022 through March of 2023. And you can see there that temperature anomaly is huge. It was 6.5 degrees above normal Fahrenheit. And the precipitation is not that much different than normal, about 2.6. And they have actually a representation of over 100 years of data on a chart on this particular website. And I think Jen's going to share the presentation. So hopefully you get an opportunity to explore that. And of course, if you look at 1 year, it's no year is really going to fall on that normal, but you can see the fluctuations over time in those graphics that are available on the website. And then I did want to also just highlight a few of the, kind of weirder events that happened that really impacted some of the pests and diseases that I'll be talking about going forward. And, the December 18th storm that we had didn't even make the list, but we had this February, I put deep chill in quotation marks because it really wasn't all that cold. But it did get cold. We had a few nights that were below 0. We had 5 with 4 in the first week of February. But another thing that we had in that same time period was periods where the temperatures were really above freezing, but also sometimes way above freezing. So a big fluctuation in temperature. And so one of the things that we had expected is some of our insects that are really not tolerant of cold winter temperatures would be impacted by those events in February. And that did bear out a little bit. I think I'll talk about that a little bit later in the talk. And then another really impactful event was the mid-May freeze event, where we had 3 nights at or below freezing. This is the Bethel, Maine station that's showing on the graph there. There are 3 nights that were at that 32 degree Fahrenheit or lower temperature. And again, that varied quite a bit across the state. You can look at the different weather stations on that website and see how that varied across the state. But that was highly impactful, particularly to our hardwood trees. And I'll show some pictures of that going forward. And then the summer of 2023, question mark. It wasn't very much of a summer, right? It was pretty cool. It was very wet. So in June, it was characterized by the National Weather Service in Caribou as being cloudy, cool, and rainy. In July, it was characterized as being very warm, humid, with near normal rainfall. Boy, that sure was a blur because the summer did seem sometimes to be kind of a complete washout. And then August was cool with, again, above average rainfall. you know, 150 to 200% of normal just in the month of August. So really a pretty cool wet summer overall. Although, actually, I say that, but it was 1 to 2 degrees above normal. So I mentioned the May frost event, and that was probably the biggest event as far as forest damage in Maine this year. We actually didn't get out to capture it with our aerial survey flights just because of the timing of that event. By the time we got in the air, because of weather and other factors, a lot of the trees had already recovered from that particular event. But in particular, you know, it was extremely severe in Western Maine, quite a bit in the capital region, and pretty spotty throughout other areas of the state. The photos here on the top left, you can see impacted beech understory. This one here is red oak. You can see the damaged leaves and a bit of recovery. And then at white ash, again, with damaged leaves and some recovery. And then some defoliated oak trees here all the way over on the right. And it was wet as well. And so when it is wet, that's often a heyday for the fungal diseases. And so we did see quite a few different hardwood foliar diseases, including anthracnose and others. The needle diseases that we are at this point fairly used to were abundant as well this year in the conifers. And as I should have mentioned as well, shoot diseases. One of the things of particular note is that we had a new state record for a fungal disease very late in the year last year. This is Rosalinea blight, and it was found on planted spruce on MDI. We had 2 different properties that had trees exhibiting this fungus. We're interested in reports if other folks notice this type of damage. Causes kind of a felting on the leaves from fungal tissue. And you can see in the pictures the fruiting bodies that are showing up looking like little, you know, fairly actually for fungus of this type of kind of large fruiting bodies. You can actually see them in this this photo here of the needle samples themselves, but also under a microscope up top, and then the spores of that fungus there. So that's a disease that has been known in other areas of the country. In particular, in recent years, at the Hemlock Woolly Adelgid Managers meeting, folks have been reporting it on hemlock. I think it's not as well known on spruce. And concurrent with this detection in Maine, there were also detections in Connecticut and New Hampshire. So it is something that's clearly made its way into the region at a broader scale than just Maine, likely moved on rooted trees. Kind of sticking with the theme of pathology, many of you have probably heard about beech leaf disease before. It was first found in Maine in 2021, reported by a landowner to the Forest Service. And it's now been found in 11 of our 16 counties. To date, we haven't found it in Androscoggin, Aroostook, Franklin, Oxford, or Somerset. But you can see from the map at the right that we've seen it in areas fairly close to many of those counties. And really, the reason that we've been so successful in finding it is because folks like you have been very good at reporting it when you do find it, and we really do appreciate it. This disease is associated with a foliar nematode. It was first found out in the Lake States in Ohio, and I think it was 2012. And in the around 2021, there was a kind of a boost in funding to do survey for this disease. I will say it's not that we weren't looking out for it. It's just that when there is some support for that, then there's a more concentrated effort for survey. And so throughout the Northeast, you really started to have detections after that funding came in. I will say that there's a lot of scientists working on understanding more about this disease. In particular, there's a lot of questions about life cycle as well as how it spreads. And there are really a lot of unanswered questions, and among them are, how can you prevent the spread of this disease? So it's really frustrating to not be able to provide a lot of information on what the response should be. And I just say in that case, you know, really stay tuned. It's something that we are working on collectively as a scientific community, understanding better how this disease moves, how it works, and hope to have more news, and we'll share it with you as we do get it. Down at the bottom of the slide, I have some pictures of the symptoms of beech leaf disease, and they include the winter symptoms that you can see. You can see that the banding that is characteristic of the disease is persistent through the winter season. So beech is one of those trees that holds on to its leaves, and you can see the dark bands between the veins on those leaves, both on the tree and on the ground as well. The nematodes are actually inside the buds right now, so they're not in the leaf tissue anymore, but you can still see the damage from the previous year. Moving into insects a little bit, and we're still working on processing some of our aerial survey data. There were some glitches in some of the software and then some of the processing. So I don't have acreage numbers right now, but what we saw was is kind of summarized in this slide. As you may be aware, we were experiencing a spongy moth outbreak in Western Maine and in the area around Jay for a number of years prior to this year. That defoliation was way down this year. I think we kind of dodged the bullet there. Here in New Hampshire, they actually still had fairly high levels of defoliation in the Concord region of the state. So it is something to still keep an eye out for. Tree mortality is increasing, and that's due to a number of factors. The spongy moth defoliation is a big part of it. I should mention, for those who aren't aware, spongy moth is what gypsy moth is now called. So still be on the lookout for spongy moth. It still could have higher populations in some regions, as we've seen in New Hampshire. But the tree mortality is not only from the spongy moth damage, but also from the years of drought preceding and concurrent with that defoliation. And we have seen pretty extensive oak mortality, softwood mortality in some areas where the caterpillars had dropped down from their preferred host trees and started to feed on particularly the hemlock, but also the white pine. And so that's something that we expect to see to continue to grow in the coming years in the short term. Another oak defoliator is brown-tail moth. That defoliation is down, but there's still areas with really severe populations. And so I would say that decrease could be temporary, because there's plenty of moths to fly in and cause defoliation in new areas. So if you look from location to location, some areas are down and some areas are up as far as the severity of the populations. And that brown-tail moth is shown in that middle slide set of images there. As far as winter moth, which is another oak defoliator, I mean, I say oak, all of these are really pretty not real host specific. They're pretty generalist hardwood feeders, but winter moth is found particularly on oaks and maples, but also other hardwoods, birch, apples, others. That defoliation appears to be up. One of the nice things about winter moth is we do have a good biological control for it. And we should, once it becomes established, we should stop seeing the really destructive outbreaks of this pest. So we do continue to work on that with partners. And then another one to add to the mix, I don't have photos of it, but forest tent caterpillar defoliation appears to be up. That was in northern Aroostook County. This is at least the third year of defoliation there. That's feeding primarily in poplar in those areas. And then just finally, spruce budworm trap catches were about level compared to previous years, although we are still going through those samples. Excuse me. I did want to highlight biological control. I mentioned previously that we do have a really effective biological control for winter moth, and that is shown on the bottom there. It is a fly parasitoid called Cyzinus albicans, and we've been releasing it since 2013 in the state. And we were concerned because we had many years where there really were not very many flies to release at new sites, and we have a really broad extent of damage from winter moth. But good news is we had really good recovery of this parasitoid in 2024, and we have over 1,200 of the flies available to release at our release site next year. So that's really good news. We will continue with this effort, and we continue to work with University of Massachusetts on it, and they are doing a lot of good research on winter moth. So that's kind of the highlight for me as far as biological control program is just that, you know, we really expect that, I expect even in my career that I'll start to see this making a big impact in our forests in Maine. Moving on to other species, we do have 3 wasp parasitoids that are being released against emerald ash borer. So far, we've released them at 14 sites in Maine, with a mix between the northern Maine populations and the southern Maine populations. In 2023, we released at 2 sites in Cumberland County and 1 site in Kennebec County. We anticipate that we'll release in the Androscoggin County and Penobscot County in the coming year. That's still to be decided, but those are areas that we have proposed for releases in 2024. And then as far as hemlock woolly adelgid, we have 3 beetle predators that have been released in Maine. And kind of the big news for that for 2023 is that some private landowners have done a lot of releases of the one that can be purchased, which is the Sagisgymnus sugi. In the last year, there were over 44,000 of those beetles purchased and released on private properties in Maine. And then another item is that we were able to go down to Maryland this past fall and collect Laricobius from forests in Maryland, and learn from one of their entomologists that's retiring this year. So that was a big event for us. Those beetles were released on Portland Water District land on the south shore of Sebago Lake. So we continue to try to establish those predators in sort of the margins of where hemlock woolly adelgid is known. So that's kind of a good segue into the next slide, sort of covering some of the invasive piercing sucking insects that we have in Maine. And at the top, I say temperature speed bumps, and I mentioned that a little bit with the climate and weather data that I showed. I think both February and May could have been impactful for some of these species. Both the cold temperatures in February as well as the frost in May. So starting with hemlock woolly adelgid, that's one that we really rely on public to provide reports of this pest. We believe that the February cold temperatures really did have an impact on their population, although there were some sites where we did winter mortality studies where the winter mortality was still not very high. Most of our sites had well over 90% winter mortality, so that's good news. It kind of slows the pest down. It's never going to eliminate it, but it gives the hemlock a break from the damage that they cause. And they are really resilient. They start to put out new growth. And if you are in areas where hemlock woolly adelgid is established, you may have noted that the 2023 current year growth is fairly robust in those areas. And then I also note a summer precipitation speed bump. And that's a casual observation. It appears that a lot of the summer generation of hemlock woolly adelgid also experienced some higher levels of mortality. And we think that may have been from the excessive rainfall throughout the summer months. So that's also good news. Rainfall is also really good at supporting that regrowth of the hemlock as well. Elongate hemlock scale, we can only assume populations are building. That's something that is introduced on a variety of rooted trees, including things like fir and spruce and hemlock. And so there is natural spread of this pest from the south and west, but as well it is introduced in new locations on those rooted trees. So just something to be aware of as you consider planting trees. And then red pine scale, that is also insect whose populations are growing. And I guess before I go on to red pine scale, I do want to point out on the picture here, this is the elongate hemlock scale. I think it's probably visible for folks. It's when it's in low populations, it's very hard to detect. And so what you're looking at is actually the undersides of the hemlock needles and the scales. The brown covers are the female covers on the scales. And then there's white covers that are the male covers on the scales. So just be aware if you are looking for elongate hemlock scale, it's really does require some really close inspection. And then, excuse me, the next species on the list is red pine scale. And these pictures we actually took this fall. We brought a Canadian Forest Service researcher out to see red pine scale in Maine forests. And this photo here on the left shows some of the intermediate stages. These are only visible because we picked off the outer bark scales on the twigs of those trees. So if you are looking for red pine scale, you do have to do some little bit of excavation and you need a hand lens. These are tiny. This female is probably like 3 or 4 times larger than these settled intermediate stage. And then finally, sort of the grosser scale things that you can see of the red pine scale are the fluffy material that the insects produce. This is most visible kind of in the summer and fall. And then the discoloration of the pine trees, although this can be caused by other things, but a lot of times you get sort of this flaming red coloration in the foliage. That's often the first thing that folks notice in areas that are hit by red pine scale. But if you look at that same picture of the trees, you can see kind of an olive green discoloration of the foliage as well. And that is, that's what shows up first as far as a visible symptom. And then finally, I wanted to mention balsam woolly adelgid. This is something that's a statewide insect pest. We expect that the damage is going to become more severe further inland as winter temperatures continue to moderate. This is one where I would expect that that late frost would have had some impact on its populations and could potentially cause some temporary relief from damage. The damage that it causes is a growth in the cells within the wood tissue. So it's called gouting, and in the stem, it can prevent the tree from really efficiently moving water in the stem and make it more prone to drought conditions. And when you have ample rainfall and events like the freeze event, trees are actually able to outgrow that gout. So in the twig here, you can see these swollen nodes. That's like that's from that proliferation of cells. And then you can see that this particular tree was able to escape the damage. That particular twig on the tree was able to escape the damage of the adelgid and grow out new healthy growth. And I saw that quite a bit when I was out in this part of the state, in sort of southern Penobscot County, and also in down east Maine this year. And then I did want to share this newer map of where hemlock woolly adelgid has been found in Maine, because there are some new sites that we haven't reported on previously. That includes a new county detection in Androscoggin County, new county detections in Lincolnville and Waldo County, in both Lincolnville and Islesboro, as well as a few additional towns. Finally, North Berwick filled in, and also Pittston and Bar Harbor. So if you're thinking about hemlock leodelgid as being a real coastal phenomenon, just be aware that it is spreading further inland and also further down the coast. And it's something that we really would encourage you to report if you find it in new areas. I did want to touch on our monitoring activities for emerald ash borer. I'm going to talk about this pest a little bit more a little bit later when I talk a little bit about the quarantine changes that happened recently. But just wanted to point out that there's a lot of emerald ash borer monitoring that goes on in Maine. It includes almost 200 prism traps deployed, almost 50 girdled trap trees processed. We use a native wasp for biosurveillance at we did this at 14 sites last year. So there is a lot of monitoring that does happen for this pest, but probably the most important is visual monitoring, and visual monitoring not only by our staff, but also by people like you as you're out and about in the woods, especially this time of year, looking for the damage from this pest. And in particular, you'd be looking for blonding damage, which is when the woodpeckers go after the larvae under the bark, and you can see the bright spots on the trunk that are revealed when that bark is taken off the tree. And I think I do have some pictures of that further on. I apologize. And then changing direction completely, I wanted to mention that this year we started some jumping worm monitoring. This is a pest that doesn't really fall comfortably in our laps, but it is something that really has an impact on forest health. Many of you may have read the article. I think we've maybe done it more than once, asking for reports of forest occurrence of earthworms in Maine. We really are still interested in those reports. So if you notice earthworm activity in your woodlots, please let us know. There is a report form available on the department website. And so in 2014, we started to get more people noticing jumping worms in Maine. They had actually been here for quite a long time. And at this stage, it's now known in 14 of 16 counties. There are two different sort of groups of earthworms in Maine. One is the European earthworms. They're things like the night crawlers that we're really used to. They're not good in the forest. They change nutrient cycling, and they can actually inhibit some growth of plants, and so even those aren't great in the forest. And then there's this other group, which is the Asian jumping worms. They're or the Asian earthworms. They're called jumping worms, and those ones are parthenogenetic, so they don't require males to reproduce, and they really can rip through organic material and disrupt the nutrient cycling in the forest, cause soil erosion, all sorts of not great conditions. And I guess the good news is, so far we don't have a lot of reports of activity in the forest itself, but I think there's probably more out there than we are aware of. The image here comes from the Belgrade Lakes region, and it shows what it can look like in the forest. The soil kind of looks a little bit like ground beef. It's really just earthworm castings. A lot of times you might notice the erosion if it's on a steep slope, and it can be difficult for seedlings to root, and just cause some real significant issues. So if you do see them, then we really do appreciate those reports. And if you are concerned about them, one way to try to prevent them from getting into your forest is to make sure that you are careful about sanitation. So things like boot brushes and cleaning equipment before you enter the forest, those sorts of things can help to limit their spread. They are spread, sometimes just on these cocoons that look very much like dirt. So finally, I want to talk a little bit about the regulatory changes that happened in late 2023. So we did have new detections across all of our forestry quarantine organisms in 2022 and 2023. And so very early in 23, we met with folks to basically talk about what the rulemaking might be going forward as far as changing those quarantines, both in European large canker, the one pathogen, but also in the two pests, hemlock woolly adelgid and emerald ash borer. And then that followed with fairly more intensive and more abundant listening sessions just focused on emerald ash borer. And then finally in October and November of 2023, those rules were finalized and adopted. And so I'll go through each of those individually. For emerald ash borer, we do continue with regulation based on the public input at those listening sessions. The participants in the listening sessions very heavily favored continuing emerald ash borer regulation. And so that is why we are where we are today. We also do have a fair amount of ash that is outside of areas where emerald ash borer is detected, and we know movement of ash is one of the things that speeds up spread of this pest. So that is something that was up for debate, was whether we would continue with regulation or not, and we did decide to continue with it. And so the revised areas for the quarantine included a small addition in northern Maine, where the population is very small and moving slowly. It's satellite infestation and doesn't have a large population to kind of push it along that the southern infestation does. We still are seeing damage accumulate in that area, but it appears to be moving much more slowly. And so those two towns were in this area of the quarantine. And then in northern Maine, we added a lot of new area, but it is smaller than the order area was based on feedback that we received in those listening sessions. And I do want to point out that even since the quarantine was finalized, we do have a new detection. Kenny Ferguson, one of our district foresters, landowner, told him he was having some issues with the ash trees around his house, and he found emerald ash borer there. And so this actually is that tree in Herman. So you can see some of the symptoms and signs and symptoms of damage from emerald ash borer, that blonding on the outside of the tree, the larval tracks underneath the bark. Sorry, I'm pointing on the wrong screen. The blonding on the outside of the tree, the larval tracks underneath the bark, and then also the larva itself. And then we also last year had some detections in Brunswick, so kind of pushing things further northward in that leading front, as well as throughout parts of Oxford County. So that's what those areas look like today. As far as hemlock woolly adelgid, the revised area, if you remember from the map of detections before, is quite a bit larger than the detected area. And that's because we want that buffer to remain in place for a while. What is regulated from that area is chips with top material and also rooted hemlock. And so one of the things that a larger quarantine area does is it allows for movement of those rooted trees in a much larger area. And I'll just say that from a forest health perspective, that's not something that we recommend, because when you do move rooted hemlock, you really are at risk of moving both hemlock woolly adelgid and elongate hemlock scale to new areas. And just that be aware that even if you have trees that are apparently free from that pest, they can be subdetectable. And sometimes, the treatments can be suppress the populations to the point where they're very low, but still present. And then finally, European large canker also was enlarged quite a bit. We had detections in new towns in 2002 and 2023. This is a canker disease that's in North America. It's only known in Atlantic Canada and Maine. It was eradicated from Massachusetts, but not successfully done in this part of the state. I don't think it was ever actually attempted in Maine. I think it was fairly widespread by the time it was detected here. So we have had some successful changes in our survey for European large canker, which may not happen this winter, but in general, it relies on those frozen bogs for those detection surveys to get out and find new areas. And we had went through a process with the plant health group to determine the quarantine area expansion, and then also went through rulemaking for that as well. And so you can see in yellow, those are the newer areas of the European large canker quarantine. We do have a partner in the Brunswick Country Club that is now part of the quarantine area, but they have been going through and pruning out infested trees or infested branches and removing infested trees over a number of years now in that sort of more satellite infestation or infection area. And then this map just shows you as well what the regulated area looks like in Canada. So you can see it's fairly widespread in parts of the Maritimes and also Maine. But if you were to look at the rest of the country and both Maine and Canada, there's no further detections in those areas. And then just a few odds and ends before I close and open for questions. We did have this interesting interception of what's called conifer auger beetle. There were a large number of pallets that were brought material in to a warehouse in Kennebec County, and the folks that had the warehouse noticed the beetles emerging. They called Maine Forest Service. We didn't have folks right in Augusta at that point, but the plant health did. And so they went out and collected beetles, and they were turned into APHIS for identification, and turned out to be this conifer auger beetle, it's not an actionable pest, which means that the pest risk assessment for it basically determined that it was not high enough that it needs to be quarantined. So it is known there have been interceptions throughout the country of this pest. It's a fairly frequently intercepted beetle in solid wood packing material. But this was the first record that we had here in Maine. And you can see some of what the pallets look like. You know, this is the exit holes and boring dust from those adults coming out of the pallets. We decided, even though it wasn't actionable, we still didn't feel really comfortable with these pallets that were supposed to be treated and not have insect pests in them. We didn't feel comfortable with having that large volume right in the heart of our forest. And so we did actually dispose of them. We took that further measure. And then I just also wanted to mention spotted lanternfly. That's a pest that I'd say the jury's still out as to whether and how much of a forest pest it will be. It will certainly be a nuisance pest in some areas of the state, even under current climate conditions. Right now, it'll be pretty limited as far as we know with the life cycle, where it can actually survive and reproduce well. We also don't know how it will do in areas without one of its favorite hosts, which is tree of heaven. So if you aren't familiar with tree of heaven, I'd encourage you to become familiar with it. And if you see it in areas of Maine, to report it through either IMAP or through our forest health reporting forms, because it is something, the tree of heaven is a species we're interested in tracking, in particular because of spotted lanternfly. It's something that can help us to both monitor for this pest, which is a serious agricultural pest, and also to manage it when it arrives here. I shouldn't say should it. This particular photo up at the top was taken by a cruise ship passenger. She reached out both in Rhode Island, where she first noticed that they were on the cruise ship, and then also reached out to Maine. And then the picture on the bottom with a number of cadavers is from actually one of our port inspectors went onto the cruise ship and found a number of adults on the ship. And I guess they actually found some in Canada as well. So they went beyond Maine. I did want to mention that we do have, thanks to the pandemic, we were propelled into the virtual world a few years ago of presentations. And so we do have a fair amount of recorded material available on our website. And one of the highlights is that we have some scouting videos that were produced for the 2021 Virtual Ag Trade Show. They include material on spongy moth, hemlock woolly adelgid, and emerald ash borer, as well as brown-tail moth. So if you're interested in how to look for any of those, I'd encourage you to check out the Forest Service YouTube channel. We also have a forest health related recordings list under that YouTube channel. So that's something that you could check out if you're interested in it. We also have a webinar listing on our homepage, which is at maine.gov/foresthealth. And there are also webinars under projects at mainforestservice.gov. And some of the things that we've done in the past couple of years with Forestry Fridays included a pretty well-attended TikTok with Chuck Lubelsic. He does a great job in presenting information about ticks. So I'd really encourage you to review that talk if that's something that is of interest to you. We also have Spruce Bedroom with Mike Parisio. Colleen Tierling did an excellent presentation on hemlock woolly adelgid management. So that was last December. I encourage you to check that out if that's something you're interested in. And Joe Elkington from the University of Massachusetts did a winter moth biocontrol discussion. So that's up there as well. And Aaron Bergdahl hosted Cameron McIntyre to provide a beech leaf disease update. So there's all that and more available for days like this when you don't want to be outside to watch at your leisure. And then I also did want to mention that we are making some slow progress in updating our fact sheets. So that's found under the pest index section of our website. Basically, we're both developing new resources, but also going through a thorough check of our old fact sheets, adding references, and mostly actually removing chemical recommendations so we can consolidate them into one sheet, because those ones, that's what tends to change the most. So that's an ongoing project, and we have started to make some headway on that thanks to Gabe LeMay, who is entomologist that started with us last year in November. And finally, just a plug for our newsletters. My staff spends a lot of time in putting those together in the growing season months, and I consider them, some of the best resource for us to get the word out to folks about what we're concerned about. But we also get a lot of feedback from people that they find them helpful. So if you are interested in forest health topics, then I really would encourage you to sign up for our conditions reports. There is some other department stuff that sometimes comes through there, but in general, it's fairly limited to the forest health topics. So please do sign up if you are interested. And I think I've actually gone over, but maybe Jen will give some time for questions.
I think everything you had to say was necessary, so we have the time.
right.
There is a question. Is red pine scale on red pines, or is the scale red and on different pines?
Yeah, so sorry, I didn't put a lot of biology in there. It's more of an update, but yeah, so red pine scale is on red pines. That's actually our only native pine that is known to impact. So that's, I think, the good news is that it's only known to impact red pine as far as our native species. It will cause quite severe damage on other species of hard pines, especially from like China and those areas of Asia. So It's apparently native to Japan, like very small native range.
Who else has questions? This is the this is the primary source for this information for Maine forests. It's great to have Allison today.
Hi, Allison. This is Kyle.
Hi, Kyle.
You made a slide there on chaga. Curious as to what your opinion is on chaga inoculations.
So from a forest health perspective, chaga is a pathogen, and so it is something that we do have some concerns about it being amplified in the forest. But there's quite a bit of information in that pest index page that I shared with on that screen. So that's that whole fact sheet. There's a FAQ. There's also a fact sheet, and that's available on that link down there, the forest pest index page.
Right. Anybody else? All right, well, Allison, you have, let's see, you have forest health at maine.gov. That's the place to send questions.
Yeah, that's our general email address. So it reaches about 3 of us. So if somebody's out, then you're still sure to get a fairly quick response to your email.
And can people send pictures of
Yep.
things they find at that email address?
At that email, and then we've really recently updated our form, our reporting form. So it's now in a survey 123 form. You can put a spot on a map if you're on your mobile phone. You can attach pictures to that as well. So you can take advantage of that reporting opportunity as well.
Right. Yeah, that's something I always try to say is that your department, your work is highly dependent on observations that people make in their woods when they're out in their woods or other woods, and being able to document. Even again, if people have a map app on their phone and they can put a pin on the location of where you found it, that would be even better.
Yeah. And that survey 123 form, you don't even need to have an app. You can just do it right through the website. So.
Okay. That's great. All right. Well, I really appreciate this. This has all been recorded, so those who weren't able to make it or who were here but want to watch it again, have it available for the coming year. And I expect to have someone from your department leading a couple of field programs this year and doing more education with our members. So it's a great relationship, and I appreciate your time today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. We always appreciate being invited.
So at this point, we've successfully got through some terrific programs. Tom Doak or Tom Allen, love to hand this over to you. One thing I wanted to say quickly is that a lot of our field education programs happen because of our chapter leaders, and I just wanted to do a quick shout out to our chapter leaders. We have 10 chapters, 10 chapter leaders, and I know we have a few here. We have Andy Schultz, Cy Balch, Andrew Smart may or may not be here. Larry Beauregard is one of our chapter leaders. Ernest Carl was here. I don't know if he's still here. Serves as our St. Croix chapter leader. And then our Southern chapter is Jeff Williams, and Merle Ring is our Western Maine chapter leader. Lauren Olette is one of our Northern Maine chapter leaders, and Randy Lagasse is the other Northern chapter leader. And very much appreciate, we have an Upper Kennebec chapter that we don't currently have a chapter leader for, that we're looking to fill that role. But it's been a real pleasure working with everybody. The chapter leaders, they are very involved in making sure that we do offer high quality programs throughout the state. So if you have any questions or if you have any suggestions on what kind of programs we should be holding this year, please reach out to me at jen@mainewoodlandowners.org. And we actually have a field program on Monday in the Mid-Coast chapter with Andrew Smart at Fry Mountain. You can learn more on our website. And then the following Saturday, there's a Down East chapter event at our Blethen Land Trust land in Ellsworth. All that information, mainewoodlandowners.org. Hope to see people out in the snow, out in the woods, even though it's winter. It's a great time to be out. Let's see. And then please check our website about our woodlot tour opportunity with Jessica Leahy and Bob Seymour. They are actually donating 1 to 2 woodlot tours where they come out for 3 hours to your woods, give you an assessment of what their recommendations are, put together a report. We'll write an article about you in our newsletter. And they ask that you submit an application, brief application that's on our website, and also commit to donating $1,000 to Maine Woodland Owners. This is their way to do a little fundraising for us. It's usually been an auction item, and this year we've expanded it to make it a little bit more in depth and make sure that everybody who does get one of these tours gets a good experience. So for more information, you can contact me, Jen, at mainewoodlandowners.org, or go on our website and you'll see there's a link to their page where we have information about this opportunity and the link to the application. All right, I think those are all my housekeeping items. Auction closes at 6 o'clock tonight. I'm frantically getting the word out to everybody that this is your last few hours to get your bids in. We're doing really well. Love to have more bids come in. Love to break some records. And we have really great items. So I hope everybody will participate. So one of the Toms, are you ready to close us out today? Maybe not. All right, maybe Carla. You want to join me?
Hi there.
Hi. I think
Yeah,
the Toms maybe might have gotten distracted here, so I think it's up to you and I to
yeah.
close
Well,
the show here.
I'd like to thank everyone for coming. It's been a great day with a lot of interesting presentations, and thanks to Jen Hicks for all of her work in putting this together. Certainly a no easy task, but it went off really well, and for transitioning over, we made the best of a bad situation, and I think it's been a great day.
Right.
And Jen, if I could add to that, I was muted before. I want to thank you and Carla and Tom for putting together what I consider a really outstanding program. And for me, I have to say that I can only take notes so fast, but I think that this presentation as a whole has provided a substantial library for those of us who want to follow up with some of the presentations here and reach back and get into some of the sources that have been identified that can help us with the issues that we face as woodland owners. So thank you to everyone. Good turnout, great program.
Yes,
Thanks.
we had a great turnout. We had a lot of people joining us today. Yeah, thank you, Tom. And yes, this is recorded, so this will be posted on our this will be our Forestry Forum webpage. It will be posted there. It will also, we'll have some additional resources attached to it on our members page, the one that has a password. I'll notify members once everything is on the website. I hope everyone has a great day and gets to see some of the sun that we eventually did get today. And stay safe, and we hope to see you in person soon. So thank you, everyone.